rest of this section is just practicing converting from radians to degrees or degrees to radians. So if you'd like to try to do these on your own using those two formulas from example 1, then I encourage you to pause the video and do that. If you'd like to work along with me, then just keep playing the video. So we have 30 degrees, and when we have the degree, we have the formula where we need to multiply by pi over 180. Now, since this question says leave the answer in terms of pi, we're only going to put in the numbers here, not the pi. So take 30 divided by 180, and you get a decimal. If you'd like to turn that into a fraction, that fraction is 1/6, and so this would be equal to 1/6 pi. And the better way to write that is to write that pi over 6. Let's do 45 degrees. We'll multiply that by pi over 180. And when we do that, 45 degrees over 180 is 1/4. Then we have the pi, or you would write that pi over 4. And then finally, 60 degrees, multiply that by pi over 180. It's the same thing every time. We get 1/3 pi, or pi over 3. So frequently, when you are dealing with those special triangles, those 30, 60, 90, or those 45, 45, 90 triangles, you can also think of them as being pi over 6, pi over 4, or pi over 3 angles. Now let's convert a few to degree measure. So we're in radians, so we need to multiply by 180 divided by pi. So we've got a little extra work here, what we need to type into the calculator. Type in pi, or 3.14, divided by 2 times 180 divided by pi. You might see that there's a pi in the top and a pi in the bottom, and so if you're paying attention, you can just simply cross those out, and you'll see that all you have left is 180 divided by 2, and you end up with 90 degrees. But if you didn't quite follow all of that in your head, that's okay. Just do it like you see. Pi over 2 would be pi divided by 2, then multiply 180 divided by pi, and you'll still get 90 degrees. We can do this second one, 180 over pi. So what do we type into the calculator? 2 times pi divided by 3 times 180 divided by pi. And when we work all of that out, we see that this is equal to 120 degrees. One thing you're going to notice is that most of the time in the textbook, you'll never see the letters RAD. We just don't write them. So the understood measurement for angles, kind of the default, is actually radians when you're dealing with mathematics. So if you don't see radian written, then, for example, like this letter A, that's an implied radian because there's no symbol with it. Now, if you're in degrees, you do need to specifically indicate that you are measuring in degrees, and so you would put the degree symbol there. So if there's no unit, it's radian. And then if you have the little symbol, then it's degrees. And then the same goes if you have something in degree, you better put the symbol. If you have something in radians, then you don't have to put a unit. So how would we convert 1.75? Well, we need to multiply by 180 over pi. I highly recommend you have something with you every time you're doing these problems, so you remember which fraction to multiply. Is it 180 over pi or pi over 180? And here we have 98.6 degrees. And then for 270, it's pi over 180 when you're dealing with degrees. So we do 270 times 3.14 divided by 180, and we're looking at 4.71. And I don't have to write radians because that's understood to be radians. Well, we have our degree and radian connection. Since these are angles, we can still do trig on them. So we can find the sine, cosine, tangent, or the reciprocal functions of a radian angle as well. There is one step that you'll have to do on your calculator, and when you're taking your final exam, you're going to have to pay careful attention to whether you're dealing with a degree problem or a radian problem. Even in your homework, you're going to need to pay attention to which one you're doing. In example 5, these are both radian questions. So what you're going to do is on your calculator, you need to find where you switch from radians to degrees. If you're using the TI-83 or 84, the button is up at the top. It's the top left and one over. It says mode, M-O-D-E. And then if you go 3 rows down, right now it's flashing on normal, then I scroll down and scroll down one more time. I have a choice between radian and degree. When it's flashing on radian, I hit enter, and that's going to switch me to radians. Now, when I go back to doing a question in degree, I'm going to need to change that back. So I like that it's highlighting now on radian. So if I just hit the clear button, which is there on the right, clear, then you can get out of it and you're ready to go. So now if we do cosine of pi divided by 3, and you can do 3.14 or the pi button. You'll get a more accurate answer if you use the pi button, but this simply equals 0.5. If you're using a different calculator than the TI-83 or 84, a simple Google search on how to convert from degrees to radians with your calculator name there will provide you with a short tutorial. Let's do one more. Tangent of 1.37. So if you do tangent, then 1.37, that's going to give you 4.9. Now we can actually do the inverse trig functions as well in radians. Here, if we know that the sine of some angle equals 0.9178, then that angle is going to equal the inverse sine of 0.9178. Now, we want the answer not in degrees. That means that we want to make sure our calculator is still in radian mode. And it is. We haven't changed that yet. So we don't have to change anything. 0.9178. Hit enter, and we get 1.63 would be the number of radians for that angle. And then a lot of the application problems will have you using radians for the measurements. So here, for this particular question, it's sine of this 0.54 times the time. So what we need to do to calculate this word problem, or this formula problem, is do 112 times the sine, and then parentheses is 0.54 times our time, 1.35. And so we'll do all of that after the sine and parentheses. That way we know that we're taking the sine of that product, not sine of just 0.54. And we get an answer of 74.6, and this is voltage, so we're dealing with volts.